They're a selfish generation of people. They're very sick people. They refuse to give up their jobs. They're dying in the Senate. They're collapsing in Congress. They will not leave. They will not cede any of their power. They're emotional terrorists. They've proven the lie of the 60s. These hippies that everybody thought were like progressive, they're actually not. They were always just selfish drug addicts. They never cared about anything they purported to care about. They just wanted to get high and roll around in the mud. And then as soon as the drugs changed from acid to money, they, became this very like materialistic, soulless group of people. But the funniest generation that has ever lived, nobody's funnier. Nobody's funnier because to be funny, like we talked about, you kind of have to just not care about anything. And there's no generation of people that have cared less about the future of this planet, about their children, about anything
Every
than
single
the boomers.
economic growth decision of the last 30 years has been made. My baby boomer generation is going to benefit, and I don't care if it hurts young people.
They're repulsive. They've always been repulsive. Yeah. I'm not a boomer. Thank heaven. My father was not a boomer. He was born in 1941.
Silent.
Totally different attitudes. I was educated by them. They were my teachers, and they were the worst, the dumbest, most narcissistic, the shallowest. Every sentence had like 9 cliches in it. They were all at Woodstock. They remembered when Kennedy was shot. It was the day the music died. Everything they said was like the Don McLean tune. It didn't make sense. It was just a series of evocative cliches strung together to create a feeling. They were idiots, but above all, they were about themselves. I hated them then. I hate them now.
What I'm noticing is that they're kind of a death cult. The boomers are a death cult in the way that radical Islam is a death cult. Radical Islam doesn't really have an interest in anybody existing that isn't a devotee of what they think and what they believe. Boomers are the exact same. Boomers are going to retire. Now, they don't want to. They don't want to. And we have some articles we'll talk about later in the show where the boomers actually don't want the world to continue. A friend of mine sent me this border thing. This is so hilarious. Over Instagram, and was basically like, she sent me this article like, are we going to have a civil war? And she goes, what an exciting time to be alive. They are giddy at the prospect of the entire American experiment failing and the civilization going dark. Boomers are ebullient at that. They are sitting around pubs and casual restaurants, and they are sitting at country clubs, and they are actually very excited about the prospect of civilization crumbling because they are at the end of their life. The boomers never wanted their children to have better lives than they did, ever. The boomers were threatened by their children. The boomers viewed their children as obstacles to their own success and fulfillment. Anyway, they are ready to usher in the apocalypse, and they're doing it gleefully.
The hidden civil war has been underway inside the decaying American empire. It was dismissed as weakness or reframed as an entire generation playing the victim. That was until 2 words. Okay, boomer. With those 2 words, the invisible war between baby boomers and millennials was dragged into the open. What had been simmering privately had become public, mimetic, and undeniable. Millennials, whether consciously or not, had begun engaging in mass-scale mimetic warfare against the generation that raised them, and they felt betrayed for good reason. Welcome to Hidden America, where magic meets cybernetics, and the code behind reality reveals itself. Okay, boomer quickly mutated into other mimetic verdicts. Karen, read the room. This isn't Y2K anymore. Even NPC, an entire generation, was reclassified as non-playable characters. Background actors, rage bots, Hylics, figures too locked into obsolete ideas to even reason with, let alone reconcile with. Okay, boomer is not an insult, it's a verdict, an indictment. It marks the moment an entire generation realized something devastating. They inherited none of the promises, the American dream, affordable housing, living wages, but all of the consequences. Boomers didn't just have it easier, they slammed the door on a future of prosperity, then gaslit their children for failing to picklock the door. This is not a petty generational beef. It is a civilizational rupture, a moral, economical, and symbolic inheritance crisis. Act 1. What OK Boomer really means. OK Boomer is not simply a disagreement. It's a total withdrawal. It means you are no longer a moral authority. Your advice is invalid under present conditions. Your reality no longer matches mine. And this distinction matters. And on a deeply instinctual level, this stings the boomer. They relish in authority positions. See, millennials chose not to rebel. They disengaged entirely, and this was new. Previous generations fought their parents, tried to overthrow them, and define themselves against them. But millennials did something different, something colder. They stopped listening entirely, and that is a seismic shift. You don't withdraw from someone unless you've already tried and failed to be understood. And that's where the millennials were at. They realized the boomer mentality was the Heilig mentality, and millennials strove for more. Act 2. The boomer worldview. Why they're hated and blamed. This isn't about individual morality. It's about structure. Boomers tend to believe hard work leads to success. Institutions are fundamentally good. Authority is earned through age. The system rewards merit. For a brief historical window, this was true, but only for them. They confuse historical luck with moral virtue. A post-war economic boom, cheap housing, expanding infrastructure, strong labor protection, affordable education. These were not achievements of character. They were conditions boomers inherited and then dismantled. They left behind not just economic scarcity, but a world increasingly mediated by technology, platforms, surveillance, and digital hierarchies that would magnify every gap and every failure for generations to come. Of course, not every boomer ignored reality. A small minority saw the cracks early. They questioned the system, attempted reform, or sacrificed personal gain to mitigate the collapse. Others had no choice but to acknowledge it. Now, because the decline is so in their face, look at the last election cycle. We had an 81-year-old Joe Biden versus a 77-year-old Donald Trump. This broke the record for the two oldest running presidents, a prior record held by two boomers. It became too obvious, too in their face. But these exceptions were and still are rare, often isolated and powerless against the larger machinery of inertia, greed, and denial. Their efforts could not stop the tide, and even now just getting boomers to reject the left-right paradigm is seen as a major win, and it's nearly impossible. They have literally been dependent upon the system their entire life. Let's be abundantly clear. The boomers' refusal to listen to any critique wasn't ignorance. It was a full-blown defense of their identity. Boomers did not merely believe in the system. They were raised by it and became the system. Sex, drugs, and alcohol weren't rebellion. They were safety valves, controlled transgressions that they let them fail, revolutionary, while never threatening the foundations beneath them. The counterculture was absorbed, commodified, and rebranded into a lifestyle. By the time responsibility arrived, the rebellion was over, and the ladder was pulled up behind them. The ideals were discarded, the excess normalized, and the consequences outsourced to the next generation. So when millennials criticized the system, boomers didn't hear a warning. They heard an attack on themselves. Because to admit failure of the system would mean admitting their life's sacrifices and moral narratives were built on something unsustainable. It wasn't denial, it was self-preservation. Their morality, self-worth, and life narrative were tightly bound to a single story. That effort is rewarded, that authority is earned, that future improves by default, that success validates the system that produced it. To question the system, then, was not to offer feedback, it was to threaten meaning. Act 3, the magic picture box, how a generation was programmed. Boomers were not just beneficiaries of a unique economic moment. They were the first generation mass-shaped by screens. They were quite literally the first iPad kids. Just replace the iPad with the television. To boomers, the television was not just entertainment. It was a moral authority, a magic picture box in the living room that explained the world, framed their reality, defined success, sanitized power, turned politicians into demigods, and outsourced all thinking to the glowing box. Drop out, turn on, tune in was truly the mantra. The TV painted their picture of perception. It told them who the good guys were, what a normal life looked like, what success sounded like, which wars were justified, which problems were personal, and most importantly, it told them not to question the system that fed it. Legacy media wasn't questioned, it was trusted, it was centralized, it was authoritative, it was comfortable. Cinema, sitcoms, news anchors, commercials, all told the same underlying story. The system works, authority is benevolent, success is earned, failure is personal, progress is inevitable, and for a while it looked true. So the programming stuck. This was the first generation sold convenience as morality. The microwave, the vacuum, the dishwasher, fast food, drive-through everything. Life was optimized to remove friction, including friction with children. This was the major one. Television didn't just entertain kids, it replaced supervision. Parenting was outsourced to the magic picture box. And here's the cruel inversion. Boomers were raised on maximum convenience and then accused their children of being lazy. Boomers outsourced thinking to trusted screens and then accused their children of being entitled brats. Boomers accepted pre-packaged narratives, whether it be 9/11 or the JFK shooting, then mocked millennials for questioning systems that visibly failed them. Boomers called it laziness, entitlement, when the fact was it was simple pattern recognition. Millennials didn't reject work. They rejected meaningless labor inside a collapsing story. They saw that the American dream that they had been sold was a lie. Act 4, when children became the obstacle. For most of history, parents viewed children as progress, as legacy, as meaning, as the future made flesh. Boomers were different. They were the first generation to experience prosperity, not as stewardship, but as personal entitlement. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something inverted. Children stopped being the reason for sacrifice. They became competition, obstacles. The boomers were the first generation to see their children as obstacles. And that's the thing. Boomers inherited abundance during a brief historical anomaly. For the first time, comfort was not fragile. Growth felt permanent. Progress felt guaranteed. So the moral logic shifted. Instead of, I endure so my children may thrive, it became, I worked hard for this, don't take it from me. Housing, social security, healthcare, political power, cultural relevance. Children weren't a future to invest in. They were cost centers. And once children are seen as obstacles, investment becomes begrudging, empathy becomes conditional, support becomes moralized, failure becomes blame. This is why boomers so often respond to millennials' struggle with mockery, minimization, moral lectures, personal responsibility, because acknowledging systematic failure would require sacrifice, redistribution, letting go, aging with humility, and the generation raised on convenience was never trained for that. This is not about bad parents. It's about a broken inheritance ethic. When a generation stops seeing its children as the future, civilization doesn't collapse immediately. It hollows out, and the children feel it. Long before they could name it, that feeling had a word now. Okay, boomer. You see, the latter was real, but it was destroyed. The contrast between the boomer reality and the millennial inheritance are especially brutal because they are undeniable and true. The boomer reality included college, job, stability, the ability to buy a decent car after a single summer of work, cultural freedom, social confidence, and the sense that life was opening rather than closing. One income that could support a household, a family that didn't require financial acrobatics to sustain, pensions waiting at the end of the road, healthcare that didn't mean choosing between treatment and bankruptcy. Millennials inherited the crumbs. The ladder of prosperity wasn't just pulled up, it was chained off. What followed was permanent debt, asset inflation, precarious and unstable work, shrinking futures, shrinking hope, an endless treadmill of self-improvement with no payoff. And then comes the questions from their parents, from these same boomers. Why aren't you buying a house? Why aren't you having kids? Why are you so anxious? Let's be clear. This isn't ignorance. It's straight up denial. The boomers chose convenience over true hard work while they preached the doctrine of hard work. Technology ensured that this gaslighting was not private. And this is truly where the war started to intensify. The resentment started to settle in. The subtle jabs without any responsibility. And that's where the divide became even worse. Millennials could compare, document, and see evidence of systematic betrayal everywhere in real time at global scale. Act 5, the real crime, moral gaslighting. And this is where resentment crystallizes. Boomers didn't just benefit from a unique historical moment. They rewrote the story. Millennials were told, your failure is personal. Your struggle is psychological. Your anxiety is weakness. Your anger is entitlement. Instead of admitting we consumed the future, they outsourced the blame. And this is a major boomer trait. That's why the anger sticks. Not envy, not jealousy, betrayal. Because being robbed hurts. Being told the robbery never happened and that it's your fault is even worse. Much worse. Act 6. The Jungian layer. The collapse of the father archetype. Carl Jung understood that societies, like families, depend on functioning archetypes. The father archetype is meant to be the wise elder, the steward, the bridge between past and future. The father protects continuity. He sacrifices so what comes next can live. Boomers were meant to play this role. Instead, at a civilizational scale, they became hoarders of capital, defenders of broken systems, narcissistic parents who refuse accountability. So millennials did something radical. They symbolically killed the father. OK Boomer is a psychic guillotine. No argument, no persuasion, no rebellion, just simply you're done. When the father archetype collapses, authority does not disappear. It mutates. It moves into further control systems. Act 7. Why the hatred is largely justified. This must be said carefully, but clearly. This is not about every individual boomer, your parents or grandparents, personal morality. It is about collective behavior and a near total refusal to acknowledge consequences. The resentment persists because no apology was offered, no responsibility was taken, no power was relinquished, no future was restored. Until that happens, anger hardens into something colder, not rage, refusal. Millennials withdrew. Zoomers never even signed the contract. Authority became algorithmic. Systems mattered more than people. Collapse became a game to navigate, not a story to mourn. Act 8. The uncomfortable truth. The turn inward. This story doesn't end with moral victory. Millennials risk becoming boomers faster than they think. If millennials gain power, protect their gains, mock the next generation's suffering, defend a broken system once it benefits them, then the verdict will repeat. Okay, millennial, let's make this point abundantly clear. History doesn't care about your trauma. It only cares whether you break the cycle. It only cares whether you get off the wheel of samsara. Technology replaced the bridge the father archetype was supposed to provide. Where the wise elder failed to safeguard continuality, algorithms now govern attention, opportunity, and memory. Civilization continues, but continuation does not. The conclusion, technology, and the locking in of betrayal. This story does not end with millennials, but it does change fundamentally with technology. Technology did not create the generational betrayal. It made it impossible to deny, impossible to forget, and impossible to reverse. Before the digital age, failure could be mythologized. Collapse could be localized. Authority could hide behind distance, delay, and narrative control. Technology removed all three. It put a spotlight on a generational betrayal. Millennials occupy a dangerous historical position, the last generation to inherit boomer promises and the first to live entirely inside a digital world that exposes their collapse. They are the buffer generation, caught between what was promised and what will be enforced. Millennials were raised analog and came of age digital. They were taught one story, then handed a device that proved it false. The internet exposed simultaneously wage stagnation alongside executive compensation, housing inflation alongside stagnant incomes, student debt alongside institutional endowments, endless work alongside diminishing returns. For the first time in history, a generation could compare its lived reality against the promises made to it instantly, globally, and continuously. Technology didn't just inform millennials, it disillusioned them at scale. At the same time, technology dismantled the remaining buffers. Stable careers became platforms. Labor became gigs. Identity became branding. Surveillance replaced trust. Metrics replaced meanings. Millennials didn't just lose the future, they were forced to watch it disappear in high resolution with receipts. OK Boomer emerged not as rebellion, but as a digital closure, a phase born for comment sections, not conversations. You don't argue online to persuade, you disengage to survive. And I just want to do a quick thank you to Metallicus for sponsoring this video and backing independent voices willing to question broken systems. Their support help keeps this work uncompromised, uncensored, and moving forward. They are the only digital banking network I trust. As always, in Metallicus I trust. Gen Z, or the Zoomers, were not portrayed the same way as the Millennials. They grew up after exposure replaced illusions. They watched Millennials follow the rules, optimize themselves, accumulate credentials, and still burn out anyway. And they learned the real lesson early. The system does not reward virtue. It rewards visibility, leverage, and timing. For the Zoomers, authority is no longer parental, institutional, moral. It's algorithmic. Power is not something you appeal to. It is something you gain, evade, or exploit. That's why Gen Z doesn't withdraw quietly. They meme, they mock, they destabilize narratives. They turn collapse into content. This isn't nihilism. It's adaptation inside a system that no longer pretends to care. In Gen Alpha, they don't wait to be betrayed. They're trained for a world without promise. Interfaces teach them. Algorithms guide them. Authority is not human. It is systematic. They inherit not only a broken future, but a managed present. Gen Alpha is growing up after trust itself has been decapitated. Their formative authorities are not parents, teachers, or institutions, but interfaces and screens. They are being raised inside AI mediation, platform governance, continuous surveillance, and synthetic attention environments. They will not experience betrayal the way millennials did. Betrayal requires a promise. Gen Alpha is being raised after the promise died. They saw the American dream die in real time. They are not being prepared for a future. They are being trained to navigate a managed present. Stability is no longer expected. Continuality is no longer assumed. Authority is no longer human. So we get to the final verdict. This is where we are, a civilization where the father archetype collapsed, without handing off wisdom, where abundance was consumed instead of steward, where authority refused accountability and was replaced by systems that do not care. Okay, Boomer was not cruelty, it was closure. It was the moment a generation realized there would be no apology, no restitution, no handing back of the future. So millennials stopped asking, Zoomers stopped believing, and Gen Alpha is being raised without expectations at all. And this is what happens when inheritance fails. Not rebellion, not revolution, disengagement. History doesn't remember generations by how much they consumed, but by whether they safeguarded continuality. The boomers didn't just break a promise, they broke the bridge. And once the bridge collapses, no amount of authority can command trust again. Only systems remain cold, efficient, unforgiving.
Loved it. This is the first generation of people
having emotional
to watch World War
attachments
II documentaries, to feel proud of accomplishments they never had and sacrifices they never made. And they would watch World War II documentaries and they'd feel very proud of themselves while eating a cake.
Yeah.
That's the boomers.
They love a cruise.
That's
Okay,
the
so the
boomers.
give me great generation.
Greatest generation
How'd
was...
they raise these people?
I think they were maybe, if they, they were a little cold, a little withholding.
Coming back from war.
Stoic.
Yeah.
But I think they gave their kids a lot. I think they gave them a lot of context to what life is. It was a lot of religion. My grandparents were incredibly religious. There was also kind of this idea that their dream was for their children to have a better life than they did.
the children were like, I'll do it.
The boomers' dream was to have the greatest lives they could.
Yeah.
It was not about
It
their
didn't
children.
continue.
They actually felt that their children
Inhibited their dream.
to some degree, and they also felt like if their children couldn't figure it out, they couldn't figure it out.